You're watching CHCO-TV's gavel-to-gavel coverage of the May 20th, 2025 regular council meeting for the town of St. Andrews. I'm Florence Mitchell. Today's meeting begins with a presentation by John Rocca of Ellerdale Ventures Limited on the proposed sidewalk for the Argyle residences. Council will later move to approve the sidewalk construction and to direct the CAO to finalize an agreement. Ken Knight and Sally Leggett of Explore St. Andrews will present to Council their 2024 year in review and 2025 strategies. Under Finance and Administration, Deputy Mayor Akagi will open a discussion on the next steps for the Market Wharf and Market Square project. Now let's join Council at the W.C. O'Neill Arena Complex Council Chambers in St. Andrews.
All right, everyone, let's call to order the regular council meeting for the town of St. Andrews. Here we are, Tuesday, May 20th. Does not feel like it. 6:30 p.m. at the W.C. O'Neill Arena Complex Chambers. This meeting is also being streamed through Zoom and Facebook. If anyone watching online has any questions pertaining to this evening, they can definitely email pnopper@townofstanders.ca, and during question period, we will review it. Let's jump right into the actual part of the agenda, and I note that all members of council are in attendance. We do have two virtually, and I do want to recognize that we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Beskotomogati people. I'm going to be looking for a mover to approve the agenda. All right, we've got Councillor Harlan and seconded by Councillor Heenan. Any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor of approving this agenda, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? That is everybody. The agenda has been carried. Any conflict of interest this evening? Seeing none, if anything comes up throughout the evening, please let me know. So let's jump right into the purpose of the meeting. We do have a couple of conversation items, but we do have two presentations as well. The first one is from Mr. John Rocca from Ellerdale Ventures Limited. It's the presentation on the proposed sidewalk for the Argyle residences. So welcome back, Mr. Rocca. The podium is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of Council. I believe you have in your package my letter outlining the changes to the sidewalk, and for members of the public at home, the new sidewalk design significantly improves upon what existed before, with a smooth transition and a better surface throughout. Essentially, we're a little bit higher at the corner of Princess Royal, about the same elevation at the entrance into the residential suites, and substantially better sidewalk at the beginning of the building where we have our driveway. In fact, the previous design of the previous sidewalk did not meet code at that area, that specific area. So all this was accomplished by relocating the barrier-free entrances for the commercial on the front on Water Street to the sides, one on the side of the driveway and the other at Princess Royal. And also by taking one of the proposed residential units, adding it to the commercial by our driveway, and replacing that on the third floor of our building by taking an existing two-bedroom unit and splitting it into a one-bedroom plus a studio apartment. The other option was to reduce the building support, and that would have taken a significant amount of time to execute and would have substantially delayed our project. So this is what we come up with, and we think it's a very good compromise and a better overall sidewalk than existed before. Happy to answer any questions, and the representatives of Spitfire, the architects, are also available online to answer any technical questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rocca. I know that there was some string that was attached as well to the front of the building for more visual. Myself, I had a chance to go down twice. I know Councillor Neal did too, because the second time he was driving by and stopped in. So Council, do you have any questions regarding the proposal that's before you in this package? Councillor Harlan.
Thank you, Mr. Rocca, for coming back to Council with another proposal. And I unfortunately was away when the string was there, so I didn't get to see the string. But I just need a couple of points clarified. So the barrier-free access would be coming in off of Princess Royal, and then a person would be going through the garage?
Essentially, for the two commercial units, we've taken a piece of the garage and added to the retail store at the corner. And that a small piece, if you look at the plan, that's where the barrier-free access is for that store. On the other end of the building, the retail space A, we essentially took the unit that was behind it, made that commercial again, and we're putting in a barrier-free access right there.
Right, that would get a person into retail space A.
Correct.
And a direct access into retail space C, correct?
Correct.
And so the intent would also be to pave the sidewalk on Princess Royal?
Yes, we would be replacing the sidewalk
Okay.
entirely.
Okay, and then,
Sorry, Councillor, but not pavement, it'd be concrete, would be the expectation, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
concrete,
concrete.
yeah, thank you. And then on Water Street, the elevation that you've talked about is from the curb to the front door, correct?
Well, there is that elevation. I was referring just overall to the slope of the sidewalk.
Right,
That essentially we're starting at a slightly higher elevation than the previous one.
right,
Then reaching a point where we're even, and then a significant improvement from essentially the middle of the sidewalk where our entrance is to the building down to the corner of
okay.
Retail A.
And so in terms of the entrance on Water Street, which is, there's an entrance, what I can see from the drawings, there's an entrance directly into the building, and then there's an entrance from Water Street into Retail A space and Retail B space, correct?
Correct.
So there would be a step. How many steps would there be?
There are no steps.
There,
This has eliminated the steps. You walk in a grade.
I guess I really needed to see the string.
Are they still, is the string still there last time I?
No, it wasn't, no.
Okay.
So with the, just to clarify again, so with the improvements to the grade of the sidewalk, then the three entrances on Water Street, they essentially become barrier-free too.
No, they're not barrier-free because those entrances, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah, I think there's a small step you can.
there's a small
there's a-
inside. The steps will be inside, not outside, if I recall correctly.
Maybe double.
Maybe David can.
Yeah, so there is no physical step at the doors. However, there will be a rise in elevation from the sidewalk to the floor of those commercial units and residential entrance. So there's no physical step outside of the building. You're just stepping up into the building by one riser.
Okay, so there's a step up to the threshold. That's why it's not considered to be barrier-free, is that correct?
Correct.
And then once inside the building, are there any steps that somebody would have to take on the other side?
No, once we're in the building, the floor is flat.
Okay, and so in looking at the plans, just so if we're looking at just a threshold, on the front side of this building for those 3 doors, then it's not possible just to put a slight inclined ramp?
No, unfortunately, we don't have the distance to do that without significantly impacting the sidewalk. That was one of the first things that we looked at.
Well, I know, yeah.
But yeah, no, unfortunately, we don't have the distance to come up come up the amount of rise that we would do with a ramp.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Rocca.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of council have any questions? We'll go Councillor Neal and Councillor Gumichel.
Thank you, Mayor Henderson. And thank you, Mr. Rocca. So you mentioned the slope as you're walking with the sidewalk. But what I don't see is the slope coming from the building down to the curb. So do you know what that measured out as? From the strings that were out, it looked like it kind of all sort of went up to the building.
David, do you have those numbers, please?
Yeah, I do. So I have, I think it was passed around, but it's the document. There's a document comparing the existing and the proposed slopes. And those are sections through the sidewalk from the building to the curb. And it's improvements, I think, everywhere. I don't know if I can share my screen or not, or if you guys have that document in front of you.
1 second, David.
So if I'm looking at the right document, then in front of retail A, it would be a 4.38% slope from the building down to the curb.
Mr. McKay, you can share the file now.
Yeah, that's the document that you're referring to, but I can share it as well.
Yeah. So those are.
Yeah, we'd be looking at a 4.38% slope left to right going through the sidewalk at retail A, 2.53 through retail B.
Okay. So with those being cross sections, that was really my only concern then, was that basically off-camber walking is typically more difficult for seniors or anybody with a mobility impairment than actually walking up, say, a 5% grade. So I think the standards that I was able to come up with is anywhere from like 1 to 2% is basically typical. And I know of a few people that have stopped walking in town simply because of the driveway cutouts having too much slope for them.
And I think John touched on that earlier. The vast majority of what was the existing sidewalk there was driveway cutouts. So we would be making an improvement to a significant portion of that.
Okay.
Councillor Gumichel.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Mr. Rocca, for coming back and seeing us again. I was down and looking at it last night, and just a reminder that we had the opportunity to put a ramp and we decided not to. So looking at it last night, just looking at the height of the curb, it seems to me if the curb itself was a little bit higher, that would enable rebuilding the whole sidewalk, so to speak, so there was less of an angle to address some of the other councillors' concerns as it being a bit too steep of a camber. So if the curb was just a little, 2 or 3 inches higher, it seems to me this would be a bit of a slam dunk, and staff would be better at making some of the decisions with regard to the final design than I, given that I'm not an engineer. But
Well, we'd be happy to work with staff and look at that point, Councillor.
I think the concern with that is it's people park in front, and if you raise the curb to a certain height, you can't open up your door to get out. So there was just that was kind of the concern of the way in which it was designed, and that's why I think Mr. Rocca and the engineers kind of lead towards this model versus that model, if I'm not mistaken, from conversation.
sorry, just thank you, Your Worship,
Yeah.
but somewhere in between where you can't open your door and where it exists now, kind of a happy medium. So, maybe like a sports car might not be able to park there, but most cars or trucks or SUVs would be able to park there. Some kind of happy medium compromise, I think, is what we need to
Councillor Neal could park there.
If I,
I wasn't going to mention Councillor Neal.
If I may, through you, Your Worship, back to David McKay. David, do you think there's any opportunity to improve?
Actually, that's probably a better question for our civil engineer, Mike Fisher. Mike, you may know kind of rough what is existing and what kind of the max you would see. I know these numbers kind of vary from municipality to municipality, but maybe you would have a better idea.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, a typical standard barrier curb ranges from 6 inches to 8 inches in height. I wouldn't want to see any more than 10. That'd be pushing it, right? Normally your max would be like an 8-inch curb. I think right now we're probably anywhere from, well, there's a large chunk of that's rolled as former driveway, and then it ranges from, 3 to 6 inches across the rest of it. So there's a little bit of an opportunity to raise the curb. I don't think you're not going to gain 4 to 8 inches, but you will be able. We could definitely raise that up a couple inches across there for sure.
Go Councillor Harlan, then back to Councillor Neal, unless any other councillor wants to weigh in.
I was out there last night measuring. So the curb is 6 inches. So you're saying, if I understood you, that we could go 8 inches without it creating any major issues?
That's correct.
Because that would change the whole elevation issue on the sidewalk, right?
A bit.
A little bit.
Yeah.
To improve it further. Yeah. Okay.
Just
Yeah, go ahead. I'll go to Mr. Spear after.
adding on that, again, I'm not an engineer, but sort of a combination between the two, I would rather see, again, if you can gain an inch or two from the curb, but I'd rather see that elevation be right there from the curb, that first 12, 14 inches where the pavers are at the moment. That to me could be the steeper section, and then level it out where the actual concrete sidewalk is, which would be more in line with the existing driveway cutouts now. Typically that first foot or so off the road is quite steep. Typically nobody's walking across it, and then it gets you up and levels off where people actually walk. Perhaps that's a compromise to some degree, where again you could put the sort of the pavers on a bit more of an angle to take the slope out of the sidewalk.
Absolutely. You could do that. I guess way back when we had originally thought that that's where our largest transition where we could pick up that grade would occur. But I guess we were kind of led to believe they wanted a constant slope from the building out to the back of the curb. But yes, in an ideal world, yeah, you have a little in brick paver.
You're breaking up, Mike. Well, Councillor, through you, Your Worship, whatever we can do to improve the design, obviously is to our best interest to improve it. The happier people are with it, the happier we are with it.
Do you have something, Mr. Spear?
Yes, Your Worship. I was just in contact with our operations manager, and we do have concerns that curb is almost, for smaller vehicles, they're going to hit it. In the winter, they're really going to hit it. And then if you start to raise, that's just the curb, then if you start to raise the bricks, because the doors swing in, I think, what did we say, 27 inches or something? And it's probably going to lose some parking along there, at least for certain size cars. So bigger vehicles, CRVs and Explorers and stuff would probably be fine, but smaller cars with 14-inch wheels are probably going to struggle a little bit there, be taking out the bottom of their door, is our concern. That was the original plan originally, but staff had a little bit of concerns, and then plowing potentially would also be a bit of a concern depending on the drop. Certainly willing to keep going back to the drawing board to figure this out, but I guess we thought this wasn't a bad compromise where we're at now, agreeing with Councillor Neal that walking kind of sideways against a curb or a slope isn't an ideal situation for mobility issues.
Thanks. Anyone else? All right, well, thank you, Mr. Rock. Appreciate you coming in here. I do know that it is in the agenda later this evening, so I'm sure council will be weighing in again. So thank you again for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Your Worship and councillors.
All right, we're jumping ahead right now. It looks like a dual presentation. We have it says Ken Knight, Chair, and Sally Leggett, Executive Director of Explore St. Andrews, doing a presentation on the 2024 year in review and some of their 2025 strategies. Welcome, the podium is yours.
I'll empathize with your allergies, Your Worship, because I've got them and my voice disappears continuously.
I'm hoping it is allergies, so never thought I'd say that.
If my voice cracks, that's why. Thank you. My name is Ken Knight. I'm the current chair of Explore St. Andrews. Your Worship, councillors, guests, and people at home, thank you for allowing us to make this presentation. It's been 6 months since we stood before you. At that time, we outlined our 2025 budget and our plans for 2025. We were asked to provide, as the mayor suggested, an update on how 2024 ended up for us and our activities so far in 2025 and what's planned for 2025. In summary, what I'll share with you right now is the fact that we have many initiatives underway. In 2025, we've already hit the ground running, lots of activity happening, and we're very excited to share this with you. First of all, we do have a fairly new board. We have in our bylaws, we switch out 1/3 of the board each year, so that happened, but we also had a couple of vacancies to fill. So we have 5 new members as of April 1st. 1/3 of our 9 members are accommodation providers, myself from the New Brunswick Bed and Breakfast, Leah Bartlett from Seaside Beach Resort, and Cole Sheridan from the Algonquin Resort. Another 1/3 of our board are marketing experts. Crosby Cotton, the former editor-in-chief of the Calgary Herald and on numerous tourism boards, including Travel Alberta. James Gannot, who has a marketing background and historic expert, and Scott Hansen from Limestone Boats in St. Stephen, who has also served with many tourism organizations over the years. Rounding that out, we have 2 out of the 3 major attractions on our board. We have Nancy Lockerbie from Minister's Island and Sierra Riebling from Kingsbury Garden. And then finally, last but not least, Michelle Boudreau from Lutz Parish Garish, one of the newer law firms in town. So we are a robust board. I'm excited to work with them. They're passionate about tourism, and I've already seen how things have just kicked off really well for 2025. Of course, we have our ex officio members, Paul Knopper and Chris Spear, Sally Leggett, our executive director, and we also have Joe Charnot from the new executive director of the chamber on our board, and Sherry Rice from the Regional Service Commission. Can't go on without thanking our founding members, our founding directors, Jamie Smith, Christy Kennedy, and Chris Arney, who really worked on this board from before it was a board for many, many years and laid the groundwork for us. We really have 3 very basic objectives. We are to increase the number of overnight visitors. We call it heads in beds, particularly in the shoulder seasons. Increase the length of stay to 2, 3, 4 nights and more, and increase the spend per person per day. And that's not only at accommodations, but at restaurants, shops, attractions. We want people to come more, come longer, spend more. Our budget, once, as I mentioned, was presented last October. It hasn't changed, and I apologize that it's so tiny on the screen there. But I think the most important things to look at are the split. 60% of that budget is marketing and promotion. 20% is community support, which includes our support of the Welcome Center, and 20% for staff and administration expenses. So roughly, we have a budget this year of $650,000. We're going to $650 in revenue. We're going to spend almost all of that this year, leaving us with about 50 at the end of the year to carry us into 2026 to fund our operations until we get the 2025 levy from the town, which usually comes in the spring. Not to at all talk too long about 2024, but it was a year to optimize our operations and hire key talent to execute at speed. It was laying the groundwork. We established our board, our bylaws, registered our board, established board committees, established procurement and governance policies. There was a lot of behind-the-scenes work that had to take place. We hired Sally, best thing we ever did, retained a bookkeeper, and contracted a social media specialist and a professional writer. So in summary, we have all the right people in the right place. Collaborations. One of the things we've been hearing often from our stakeholders is that they're confused. They know that there's Explore St. Andrews, there's the Chamber of Commerce, there's the Town of St. Andrews, there's the BIA, and they're confused about who does what. And we heard that loud and clear when we did a survey with our accommodation providers earlier this year. And so that's one of the things we're working on. And collaborating with those other organizations and with the province has been our goal. So we've established a really strong working relationship with the province. Sally and the marketing committee have done phenomenal work there. We have a strong partnership with the town to open and operate the Welcome Center. It just opened this weekend. And we're working on some major ways to gather really solid data from those visitors when they come in. Coordination with the 3 major attractions on discount coupons and advertising. And when I say advertising, I mean coordinating that we're not all advertising in the same place at the same time. We're spreading our wealth. Cross-community connections with St. John and Fredericton tourism organizations. They've been doing it a lot longer than we have. And as I mentioned, stakeholder input from the levy providers and with the Chamber of Commerce on the awards gala and the town map. As I mentioned, festivals and events funding is obviously one of our major focuses. We want to support the festivals that bring people to this town and have them stay longer, spend more. And we just finished our allocations for 2025, and we actually had a scoring system for those that are in the shoulder season. So if you have a new event that's in the shoulder season, you scored higher. So over a 5-year period, we've allocated $330,000 in funding, $85,000 budgeted for this year, and $75,000 we've already allocated. The remaining 10 we leave in a holding pattern because we do get events that come out of the woodwork halfway through, and we wouldn't want to say, no, we're out of funding. So that's our reason for that. The Welcome Center I mentioned, very strong for us. We've actually established a subcommittee for the Welcome Center to work with the great team there. We've got 3 fantastic people working there, and we're working closely with them, Sally and the marketing committee. We've invested $119,000 over a 5-year period, $40,000 this year. Along with some improvements to artwork and furnishings in there. The mainstream media have their eye on us, and that doesn't come by chance. It's a result of Sally and the marketing committee building strong relationships with the media so that when they're thinking about who should we talk about, we should talk about St. Andrews. And of course, it's all unpaid. Just a few quick examples. The Toronto Star did the Destination Alts recently, where we were named as a better alternative to Victoria, BC. 5 million impressions and 132,000 in ad value. The Current, where people were asked to vote on out of the top 20 attractions, and we were named one of the top 10. And numerous articles the CBC has done. The most heartwarming was the St. Andrews Feels the Love from Canadians, where Chris Arney was highlighted. Paid and strategic advertising. We're doing more of that, obviously. We have a strong partnership and long-time relationship with Edible Magazine, and we did a spring introduction to all the restaurants in town. A fall campaign in the Saltscapes magazine, and we currently have radio ads running in Fredericton, Moncton, and St. John, encouraging lengthening of day trips to overnights. There is a clip embedded there, Paul, if it works. It's the little tiny, yeah, there you go. They never work. You can try it. It should work.
Thinking about a day trip to St. Andrews? Be sure to take a tour of the magnificent Kingsbury Garden. Then drive across the ocean floor to visit Ministers Island. Come face to face with sea life at the Huntsman Marine Science Center. Explore the legendary Algonquin Resort. Enjoy world-class dining at the Ross Mountain. Food and drink festivals, dragon boat races, fabulous tapas at the Chandler Room, lobster rolls, a plethora of historical sites and buildings throughout town, fun-filled events, live music at the amphitheater, paddleboarding, kayaking, or canoeing, waterfront dining, spectacular sunsets, whale watching, deep-sea fishing, clam digging, local craft beers, wine tastings. Whew. On second thought, you'll need more than a day to experience it all. Plan your weekend stay at explorestandrews.ca. Thinking about a day trip.
So that one and another one are currently running in Frederick, as I mentioned, and we've got ads ready to go in Bangor coming up, and we do have a clip of that. We can leave that till the end if you'd like to hear it. Okay. Social media and the website, obviously a strong focus for us. As I mentioned, we hired a social media expert. Our social media presence has been very strong. We're establishing new followers. He's been spending a lot of time at the Charlotte County Archives, focusing on the town heritage. All posts obviously drive to our website to encourage accommodation bookings, and the website updates are ongoing to make sure that it's correct when people get there. We're working with a public relations specialist who has, in the next short while, will be sending a media release to 300 plus travel media outlets with which she has a relationship, and fam tours planned in September with 3 travel writers from Maine, who will be visiting us and writing about us and going away and creating some buzz. The highway number 1 sign, for all of us who have driven past it and shed a tear because it's falling apart. I think there is an actual piece falling off of it. It's weathered and dated, so we're working hard on establishing a new highway number 1 sign. That will happen later this year to attract and direct visitors off the highway. It'll be very basic, a giant, beautiful Cindy Kohler photo with basic directions and a tagline to "Don't Miss St. Andrews." I think one of the most exciting things that we're working on is the WOW video. For those of us who remember, the fun day starts here. When I hadn't quite moved here yet, but had property, I used to watch that video every day. I was obsessed with it because it just gave you the feels of what my new life in St. Andrews was going to be like. So this is what we're trying to achieve here. We have a wonderful collaboration with the Marconi Agency and the Algonquin Resort, who is simultaneously working on a video with them. The Marconi Agency, if you don't know them, they do all of the Four Seasons hotel videos worldwide. And if you have a chance to YouTube and have a look at them, they're fantastic. The common thread between the 2 videos will be what makes the town special. Obviously, we're not going to focus on the hotel. They're not going to focus on. They'll focus a little bit on tourism, but the economy of scale of having all the team working on 2 videos at the same time saved us a lot of money. It will also allow us to have some B-roll footage for hundreds of effective social media posts, because we know that video always gets the most likes and shares. Sorry, I spoke very fast, but that in a nutshell is what we've been working on and what we plan to do for the rest of 2025. And happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you very much. I certainly appreciate the presentation. I did have the opportunity to sit down too and ask a pile of questions myself, but safe to say that it's good to see Explore finally off the ground. It was kind of a few years of partnership with the town, trying to get everything in place, and it's great to see it in place. It's certainly the most initiatives I've seen in a presentation from Explore St. Andrews to date, so thank you very much for that. And I know there's a few members of the board here. Thank you. At the end of the day, it is a volunteer position, and we are greatly appreciative of all of your work promoting St. Andrews. So with that being said, I know that there is probably some questions from council, maybe different initiatives or anything like that. So I will open the floor if any member of council has any questions. Councillor Harlan.
Thank you very much. And it's very exciting to see what you have done so far. I think it's a great launch. I have family across Canada, and I have had a number of people say, I have heard about St. Andrews. I've seen something about St. Andrews. So I think that that is tremendous. And I'm excited to see what comes next in terms of the promotional material that you're continuing to work on. I do really understand, I think I understand, the collaboration, some of the collaborations. I certainly understand the collaboration with the province and working with the Department of Tourism. I understand the local collaborations. Where I'm still unclear is the collaboration with the Regional Service Commission. And perhaps this isn't a fair question, and that's fine. But I guess I would like to understand a little bit more about what that relationship, how that relationship functions, and who does what, because it's very fuzzy in my mind.
I guess, and Sally will help me, I think the relationship would best be described as dysfunctional at the moment. We don't hear from them. They're obviously, Sherry is obviously a member of our board ex officio. She doesn't come to meetings. She doesn't offer updates. We're very, I guess, disappointed would be the best word. But fortunately, and as I mentioned, Sally has done an amazing job of kind of, if I can say, going around her and now dealing directly with the province, and has a very strong relationship with the province. And that Toronto Star ad was a direct result, or not ad, article was a direct result of them coming to Sally and saying, this is an opportunity, you guys should take it.
Right.
So I don't know if you have anything to add, Sally.
I can add on to that too. The fact that the province is working directly with you indicates that probably NB Tourism sees a challenge as well, because the goal of the RSCs was to stop talking from basically the province to every community and do it through regional offices. And the fact that they're meeting with Explore St. Andrews definitely indicates that there's a disconnect. So one that I have brought up and one that I will continue to bring up as a challenge, but also being a little sympathetic because it's a bit of an HR issue as well.
I appreciate that. But I also understood you to say in your presentation that you do have collaborative working relationships with St. John and Fredericton in terms of what they have been doing as well.
Yes, yeah. Sally's met with both of them and really just taken away learnings because they've been doing it a lot longer than we have.
It was with Jennifer Silliphant, who's the director of destination for St. John, and yes, sorry, is that okay? Stacey Russell, and I reached out to them when we were doing a survey to get their thoughts on, do they do surveys with their stakeholders? So we just had this really wonderful Zoom, 2 separate Zooms with each individual, and then they sort of told me what they do to get great feedback from their stakeholders.
Right. Which I think, wonderful. Which is great, because I think that the opportunities we can leverage in terms of learning from others rather than reinventing the wheel is wonderful. I am very excited at what I'm seeing, so thank you very much.
Councillor Heaton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Knight, for a great presentation. Years ago in my former life, I worked for the media tour program for the province of New Brunswick in tourism, and one of my jobs was to measure each word that was written about the province and assign a value to it. And every word that's written about, in a positive way, about a town or a tourist destination, etc., you could not pay for, like in Toronto Star, etc. I mean, it used to be like if it was mentioned, it would be millions to put that in. So great job for that. Thank you.
And I do think that it's a huge opportunity to work with the travel writers and the agencies, simply for the fact that the province of New Brunswick, I don't know, I'm sure it's still part of their strategy, but it did feel like pre-COVID there was a lot more travel writers coming to this community than there has been the last, post-COVID. So I think the fact that Explore is starting to step up and realizing that there's a leadership opportunity with media and bringing it here, because you hit it right on, Councillor Heenan, and I know Minister's Islands here, is when you have a travel writer come and do an article on you, it's promotion that as a municipality and as individual businesses you can't pay for. Your budget just can't do it. So the return on investment, and if you look at the impressions of the Toronto Star article, I don't think Explore St. Andrews could pay for that amount of impressions, to be completely honest with you, if you look at how large it is. So that's a good point. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Knight. I really do appreciate the presentation and the wonderful work that you and the whole crew has done with putting St. Andrews in at the tip of everybody's tongue in New Brunswick and around the Maritimes. I was hoping to see an audited budget for last year. In 2023, in December, we were given, or January, we were given an audited budget from that previous year. Last year in 2024, we just finished our town's budget from the auditors, and the money from St. Andrews was included in there, but it was a simple in and out. It didn't forecast, it didn't tell anything about where the money was spent, how it was spent, and exactly how much was spent. So I'm really looking to get like the full-on audited numbers from last year. I'd love to see that.
Okay, yeah, so in the package, 2024 is listed there. Those are the audited numbers, and I know Chris has those.
Yeah, Council, part of our audit, we did get a copy, so I can forward that along, no problem.
Please. Thank you, sir.
Councillor Gubishal, did I see your hand?
Yes, thank you, Worship, and thank you, Mr. Knight, for the presentation. Marketing's a hard thing to measure, I'm sure, and to kind of pick up, and you've been doing good work, and we're hearing lots of positive things. However, to pick up on something that Councillor Harlan was saying about fuzziness, there's been quite a bit of fuzziness from my seat. Trying to get the, for example, the Tourist Information Center off of our desk and onto somebody else's desk has been a multi-year project, and is still kind of on our desk. But we do appreciate you helping with some of the lifting on that. In terms of fuzziness, also bringing people to St. Andrews is important, but once they get here, we have significant challenges with infrastructure. So, for example, over the past few years, the town has spent most of our portion of the tourism accommodation levy on infrastructure things like bathrooms at the Point, new bathrooms at Town Hall, emergency bathroom repairs here, like basics. And as we bring more people here, I think we'll continue to need to look at that split of 70-30 or 2/3, 1/3 to at least something more in a 50-50 range. And maybe that's not something that this council can do in the last year of our mandate, but I do think that number needs to be looked at in terms of a more of a 50-50 split at the very least. Further with accountability, and not to be negative, but further with accountability, I'd ask for a more of a staff-based sort of report. Every month we get in our agenda packages a report from each of the staff departments, and the Explore St. Andrews isn't part of those staff reports, but we have been getting correspondence, and I think that's helpful in getting in opening the communication and not having fuzziness. I think open communication is healthy, so more of the same and continued communication with council. So without wanting to micromanage, we don't want you spending all your time telling us what you're doing, but we do need to have a better idea so that it's not fuzzy and there's a more open communication there. And finally, we had, again with fuzziness, we had a letter in support of expanding parking from the directors of Explore St. Andrews, and the directors weren't limited, and given that weren't listed, and given that 50% of the board is new in the last month and a half, I think again putting everybody's name on things, more getting to meet people. Like I don't know very many people on the board, and I kind of know most people in town, so no offense, but I think more communication is key. And just to summarize, that 70-30 split, I think needs to be looked at, and maybe that's something for the next council as an election issue. What would be a more equitable way to divide these tourism fund accommodation monies in a cash-strapped community, and that's a quote I'm taking from a CVC article when they were first looking at the tourism accommodation levies. It was a way for cash-strapped communities to raise money, and certainly this is a cash-strapped community. We're debating over amounts to give to groups all the time, and this is a significant budget that we don't really have any control over. So that split and more clear communication from my seat would be very helpful. But thank you again for all the hard work you're doing. I know, again, marketing is difficult to manage or to measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gubishal. Any other member of council? All right. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. Just on that, I think ultimately, to your point, is the breakdown between Explore St. Andrews and we'll call it tourism development is what we actually call the infrastructure. That is within the bylaw. So council itself set that 66-33 with exception of small reserve for potentially legal, which I think is capped right now, and a percentage that goes to the Regional Service Commission. So it does not, that portion doesn't come necessarily directly from the taxpayer of St. Andrews, but the visitors themselves. So all that can be, to your point, visited, whether it be this council, the next council, within that bylaw, because that is what determines the breakdown, which is within your control. The other thing is, when it comes to infrastructure, the bylaw doesn't really mandate them to do infrastructure. It's almost like not technically part of what they're supposed to do based on the bylaw. They are supposed to do mainly the marketing and promotions, and it really even breaks it down even further than that. But that's all stuff that we control as a council, and the future council does. So definitely a conversation that could be had, but I would encourage us to definitely, or the future council to definitely work with Explore St. Andrews, because they're trying to do long-term planning, and if their financial situation is changing, then they're going to want to have to adapt their strategies to go along with it, right? So, but thank you very much for coming in here. Certainly appreciate it. Thank you to all of you. We appreciate, again, the volunteerism, and yeah, feel free to stay, but otherwise we'll give you a moment. All right, council, we did take care of the minutes and the communication and the staff reports at our last regular meeting, so that will allow us to jump right to section I. There's no particular motions this evening, but they are important discussion items on two files in particular. So the first one is going to be a Market Wharf and Market Square project next steps. I'll pass it over to Mr. Spear.
Thank you, Worship. So to recap, I know there's been a lot of, I guess, political pushback over the last week or so that I don't address in my report, and this is kind of just taking the project as is and moving forward with it as best we can. And so, the political side council's aware of, and you'll have to think about it. But if we're planning on trying to see this project to completion, time is running out somewhat on us, and that, we have to get this out tender over the next few months to just, the next couple of months, so we can get everything ready for start and right after Thanksgiving, in order to reduce the risk that we go into next season. So as part of my report, I explained the funding and stuff, and that basically we're kind of locked in at $5.7 million of funding from the provincial and federal governments, and we do have up to $2.8 million in borrowing capacity that we've set aside if need be. And so right now, with the final drawings, which we submitted to council electronically, I think maybe a week and a half ago, included in that was an estimate now of about $8.3 million for the total project, including engineering fees, and there's significant, I think it was 15% of contingencies built into that too for unplanned events. So it could be higher or lower, but as we know, when you go to tender, everyone makes their best estimate, and you're not sure until it comes to the final say, or the final reception of bids. So right now, assuming their $8.3 million in is the budget, we have about $5.4 million in remaining grants, which means we would use about $2,850,000 in borrowing I talked about earlier. Then between tax revenue and capital reserve funds, about another $154,000 to balance out the equation, I guess, if you will, to completely fund the project. Council can decide. I think at the end of last year, we almost had $2 million in the general capital fund, so we could reduce the borrowing and increase the money or funding from the general capital fund to offset. So, you know, as we go through it, that'll be the discussion among council, how the ultimate financing will be. So the project, you know, we started this project literally about 7 years ago, I think, with the original application. It was the complete fill was the original thing that the council before you decided wasn't acceptable, and so we went through multiple reiterations of design drawings until at the first of 2024, council decided on what we were calling the hybrid option, where the fill went out so far, and then we added in concrete piles with a cement deck that kind of blended into the existing wharf quite a bit better. And so we've been going through that process. We have the design drawings now that CBCL is just waiting for us to give any suggestions, alterations. Staff is just looking. We have some of our own things we would like to kind of bring to council's attention in the design. One would be right now, the whole parking or the whole area of Market Square right now is going to be asphalt with probably stamped asphalt to give it kind of a brick look-like feel or whatever, some type of design. From a cost standpoint, that'd be the most efficient way. The cost of actual bricks would be significant. And that's, though, just for the expanded part. So the original Market Square that's there now would stay as is till we go into a next phase, if we do to raise the center of the square a little higher. One of the things that we've talked about is what could happen. If you remember, you made a visioning exercise in the budget that we've sat on until we decided what the final outcome of the tender was, and that if the tenders are successful, we'll jump right into that either over the summer or early fall to determine what the look of Market Square is going to be going forward. One of the things that staff are recommending is that we look at putting in some different power, that it's away from the current St. Andrew's pub at the back of the post office building, and centralize that a little bit. So if you want to do anything there, it just makes it a lot easier. And so there might be services we want to add to potential building. If nothing else, instead of, we've talked about different things there. And so we don't want to lay new asphalt and then rip it up to put in services when now would be the time to do it. There's also a question, as you know, we've gone into an arrangement with one of the existing whale watching businesses there, and their placement hasn't changed on these drawings. It's supposed to be moved back some, so we'll go back. I'll review the agreement and just ensure that it falls there, that one of the things that we wanted to rectify was that we were going to give more access between the post office building and that business in order to allow more open access in and out. And so right now, you know, we have a large timeline of what we did there, including the back of the report. I don't think you need me to go through it step by step, but staff are kind of, what do you want for next steps? Do you want to have a dedicated meeting to go over the drawings? Do you want to come in the town hall, you know, just look at them individually and provide recommendations? Staff just needs to know what next steps, because realistically, we could put this out to tender in the next few days. I don't expect you to, but it's just, that's kind of where it is, that CBCL is sitting on council to provide feedback on these drawings and where you'd like to go to next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Spear. I appreciate that. Council, over to you. Councillor Neal.
Thank you, Mayor Henderson. Just to address Mr. Spear's last point there, as far as next steps go, at the very least, I would like to see another public open house, because I firmly believe that the general public doesn't fully understand what we were proposing here, although, again, there has been an extremely long timeline for it. But even from the diagrams that have been put out, the most recent ones, I'm looking at the actual final drawings here, but all the previous diagrams showed the expansion is basically blacked out, and I don't think it gave a true appreciation for how much of the wharf was actually being, I'm going to call it, buried by this infill. And it wasn't until the Transport Canada application came out that I noticed it. And in that drawing, you can actually measure it. I think it was measured there, and it accounts to about, it's between 260 and 270 feet of the existing wharf structure that is being consumed now by this infill. And I don't think that is sort of public knowledge for most people. The level of infill here, to me, again, it's something that I've spoken about several times. Environmentally, in my opinion, it's a disaster. It's going to irreversibly change our waterfront. Again, I've spoken and I've sent out a few photographs before, but putting this rock infill out 90 degrees from the shoreline, again, is going to change the flow patterns of the harbor. It's something that we haven't looked at. CBCL has not addressed it, although I think it's been brought up several times. No hydrographic studies have been done, no current studies have been done. The impact to, again, infilling that marine habitat, which, again, was mentioned several times by several councillors here to CBCL, that this was going to be an issue. That went unheard until, again, the final moments when DFO did finally step in. But again, to have this much of an impact on our own marine habitat, and again, have to pay almost, well, it's $300,000 to a neighboring community to be allowed the option of infilling our own marine habitat, to me is just ethically wrong. Again, I understand that the Fisheries Act allows for it. Being quite familiar with the Fisheries Act, I don't believe that that is the true intent of it. I believe the intent, again, is typically this shouldn't be a first option. There's always situations where a municipality or a community might have to infill some shoreline. And this is the way that the Fishery Act addresses it, in the sense that, you know, if you have to do a project like this, then yes, you can offset it by remediating some other environmental area of your community. Paying the $300,000 to me is just that. I think we're just purchasing the right of infilling our own shoreline. Aesthetically, again, I think it came up early on. I know it's been mentioned that, you know, this was the option that the public chose. I've contested that several times. I don't think the public chose it. I think the public settled for it. I think the other options that were presented at the time, of them, this was touted as being the most affordable and the quickest one to complete, which I think is why most people settled for it. Again, aesthetically, it's going to forever change our waterfront. Just looking at the drawing again here and the slopes, you know, we were talking earlier about accessibility. The slope all around this thing is, in some places, it's almost 9 degrees in behind the Day Adventure Center, going up to a rock wall. The slope coming off the end of the wharf is 6.3%. To me, again, it's a case of trying to cram a square peg into a round hole, essentially. And again, I appreciate the amount of work that's gone into it and the effort that staff put into originally finding this funding. But I think overall we've lost the basic intent of the project, which was to repair the wharf. again, it's now become more about sort of this climate change funding, which I know it's hard for people to give up free money, call it free money. But I think it's even tougher to make a decision that, you know, we're committing $2.8 million potentially just to get this money for, again, only the first third of the wharf. We have no plan moving forward with regards to the rest of the wharf, which we have heard numerous times does require work in itself. Councillor Weir has spoken to that before, and I would tend to agree. Again, I think we should have a more robust plan to address the wharf entirely. And again, sit down and come up with basically an asset management plan of how we are going to invest in wharf renovations year to year. Apart from the environmental aspects of it, again, I've spoken myself, since we haven't, or CBCL hasn't done any sort of current drawings or anything like that. I have spoken to a few oceanographers in the area, which both concurred with what I feel, again, is going to change the flow patterns of the harbor. We're going to end up with more erosion, more sediment deposition. Again, I think we're going to end up with, again, my experience is telling me that we're going to end up with a very, very muddy substrate around, at the very least, one side of this wharf. Again, aesthetically, I touched on that. Financially, I've heard the mayor mention before, talking about this, and again, it was stated that we felt we had no good options at this point. Well, no good options to me is not, it's not the reason to move forward with $2.8 million of taxpayer money. Again, we don't have a plan for the rest of the wharf. At one point, I heard this referred to as a legacy project. I'm at this stage of the game, I'm looking at this as more of a burden that we're going to leave for future councils. Some of us here have got a year, less than a year, sitting at this table, and there's a good chance that this project might not even be completed by then. And with no plan for the rest of the wharf, I think we are, again, leaving a future council and the future taxpayers a heavy, heavy burden on what they're going to do with the rest of the wharf. On top of that, again, it was mentioned in a couple of the correspondence we received about the potential liability issues. Again, I think I've spoken to that before. Raising up the portion here and the slopes that have been indicated in their final drawings, again, just confirmed what I had suspected before, that we are basically going to be sending water runoff off to both sides, to the neighboring properties. And I can't think of a situation anywhere else where an individual property owner would be allowed to raise their property and send even rain runoff into neighboring properties. It's just not allowed. So again, to do this at the expense of not only the taxpayer, but again, the neighboring properties. I look at the Day Adventure Center especially, I can just see that pooling water from the way the slopes are heading towards it. A heavy rain event and a high tide is going to essentially, in my opinion, again, flood Market Square. I've mentioned that before. We're coming down from Water Street, hitting basically the back of the cenotaphs, or a little bit farther, I guess, and then going up. During a high tide, there's nowhere for that water to go. And it's going to end up running off to one side or the other, potentially damaging neighbors' properties. And again, I think opening the town up for liability. The extent of the rock wall, again, is taking up our entire water lot. So the only other place where the damage is going to happen is in neighboring properties. So again, for that and several other reasons that I've mentioned before, and I don't have to reiterate again today, but I, again, just don't feel like I can support this project the way it's presented here at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neal. Any other member of council? Councilor Gouverchel.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Councilor Neal, for your impassioned presentation and discussion. I worry that like when you talk about legacies, there's legacies of like previous councils. You know, like the council that lost the support of Lady Beaverbrook, for example. That's what they're remembered for. And another council, and not to point fingers at anybody, or another council that lost control of the old rail tracks all the way out to the highway, you know, in terms of legacy. And I just don't want to end up being the council that lost the Wharf, is my concern. And we have this money, and we've worked hard, and we've put a lot of effort in. And I hear Councillor Neal's concerns, but at this point, I'm quite concerned that if we lose that funding, we might not end up with a Wharf. And I don't want that to be our legacy either. So perhaps a public meeting is a good idea if we could do it in an expeditious way at this late date. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councilor Gouverchel. Appreciate that. And I guess I'll add on, since a quote of mine was rightfully used. But one thing's for sure is a bad option is not doing anything. The number one thing and the most consensus we heard when we did public engagement is people in the town of St. Andrews expect us to have a Wharf. So no matter if we like any of these options, whether it be this council or the next, someone's going to have to do something real soon. It's got a weight restriction already, and that Wharf will be shut down. So if you need a fuel truck down there, it's not going to be able to go down there, right? If you're a pleasure boater and you want to drop something off, you're going to have to carry it the whole length of the Wharf eventually. If you're an aquaculture worker, diving gear, the list goes on. Something, whether it be this council or the next, because ultimately, at this point, let's be honest, if you don't go ahead with this project, it's going to be the next council, right? Like you're starting over. You're not going to have time to get this done. That's not a good reason to do it, but just making it clear that that's where you're at right now. But yes, I agree. In a perfect world, the Wharf would be fine to replace exactly how it is today at the exact same height, but that's not an option for us for two reasons. Is the sea level rise is real. We're experiencing it. But the second option is restoring it the way that it is today. The municipality actually can't afford to do that. And I hear the comments on doing the complete plan of the Wharf. You know, technology changes. That's quite a few years away. You could do it, but the next council at that time is going to look at that plan and say, I like it or I don't, just like we get a plan and we say, do we like it or we don't as well. So, but point taken on some of the concerns for sure. They are legit, and I'm happy with whatever way council goes, other than the fact that any significant changes to this plan right now, probably the best bet would be to go back to our funding partner and let them know that we will restart the project and reapply, which there is risk to that plan as well, right? So that's just the reality of it. Councillor Ware.
Yes, I agree with most of what Councillor Neal said. You mentioned the weight restrictions. My immediate response to that is the other 2/3 of the Wharf that's not being worked on, when are they going to be under weight restrictions? In 2 years' time? No one has mentioned how long this is going to extend the useful life of the existing Wharf. It may only be for 2 years. Big price to pay. I'm not into hydrographics, no oceanography, but I did drop a device off of the Bayside Wharf one time to measure the speed of the water going by the wharf. 6.2 knots. Now, 6.2 knots coming through that area is going to move a lot of sediment around and that type of thing. And again, I have no idea what the result is, but I think someone should have some idea of what is or what the result of that is going to be. And I'm not capable of evaluating it. I'm capable of listening to an expert on it. But I know what the results were when I tried to determine why I didn't have to dredge every 5 or 6 years. Well, it didn't take me long to figure it out. The seawater was taking all the dredging material away just because of the current. And anybody that's been out there in a boat knows the tremendous force of the tides. There's no man-made structure that can withstand them completely. So it is very difficult. There's no timelines on how long this is going to help us, how long it's going to give future councils to come up with answers. It's a mess, I guess, and I don't have any magic answers and any magic bullets on this one, that's for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heaton.
Yes, Your Worship. First and foremost, I don't know the numbers that from the survey, but I do know that it was how many percentage voted for having a wharf in the town of St. Andrews of the surveys that were sent out?
This is over 80%, maybe
Over
closer to 90.
80%. Number one. Number two, we really, I really feel we don't have a town without a wharf. I know that that's really far-fetched, but I really do feel that. I would invite anybody who wants to see infill to go to Shediac and notice what happened to their point when a big surge of water came in and took the whole point, restaurants and everything else out. And it did it within an hour. And my friends have a cottage there, and they had to do all the infill. They had to fix it all up. So I invite anybody to go see how they redid it and how nice it looks and how well it functions and how safe it is. That's what I see. And I'm telling you right now, if we don't take advantage of this, this is 7 years in the making. 7 years. 7 long years. Let me repeat that. 7 long years. And we have had public, we've had private consultations, we've gone to Bayside, we've done everything a council could do in order to make this work, or semi-work. And I just feel that there comes a time you have to set a pen to paper and say, we got to do it. I'm with Councillor Gumashel. I don't want this to be the council's legacy, that we did not provide a wharf for the town of St. Andrews. When we came in, we have an extended time, 5 years, and we still can't get this done. Well, there's something wrong, because this town does need a wharf. Thank you.
Maybe relevant, Mr. Spear, do you want to summarize the meeting with DFO today?
Sure. If you don't mind, George, could I touch on some of the points that some of the councillors brought up? So in regards to the life of the wharf, as you were aware, the end of the wharf, so all of the pier head and the intermediate, we call it, between the approach and that, was basically replaced and repaired back in 94, 95 after the fire. So that should be good for 50 years, not 50 or 60, but another 25 to 30 years. It should be noted, though, that there's $1 million set aside in this budget for the steel piles to wrap them, because they are eroding above the water line. There's already anodes on them, but those aren't as effective on things that are above the water line. So that is part of it. And regardless of what we do with the approach, that should be done in the short term. So there's $1 million+ there that we should be doing. The question on, I guess Councillor Neal had mentioned about the muddy, but the section of the wharf that, you know, goes out towards the wave break is already considered really muddy. And even during my early tenure here, we dredged it, and within about 6 months, that dredging did nothing. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, I can't speak it. We're going to have that problem regardless. Dredging, I wouldn't know if I'd ever recommend it again without doing something else, because it's a lot of investment for no result. There is work also being done on the intermediate trestle, repairing some of the damage, because there is still wood structures underneath that, so some of that's included in these diagrams. So that's extending the life of that even further. I agree that we don't know what we're going to do after the first raising of half a meter. But as the mayor alluded to, there's hopefully new technologies, or who knows what the economy of the town will be back then. And again, we're relying 6 years, 7 years on modeling for sea level rise. It could get worse or it could get better. So this is just kind of a medium-term solution. It should be said, though, that one benefit of the infill was it's easy to keep pyramiding it, if you will, keep building on top of it. So let's say things were extreme. It's a lot easier to do that because if you, like our current structure, if we had to raise it, we basically would have to rip it all out and raise the whole thing. I'm not saying it right or wrong, but from a cost basis, that's kind of where it sits. Back on the hydrology, so I don't disagree. We've had this discussion before. Council's never given direction to follow through on that, to be perfectly honest. CBCL didn't push for it. And one of the things I've said before, and we were relying on the regulators to have a look at it. So we had a discussion with DFO, who is looking at the project, and they said that the project like this, they looked at it. If it was more severe than it was, they have asked for those types of reports. But for a vast majority of them, including ours, this type of infill is very common, and they don't request it. So if the council wants to carry through with it, that's fine. But from the regulators at DFO, they don't think it's necessary. They're not saying they have an opinion on what the long-term effect could be, so I don't want to put words in their mouth, but they see these all the time and are okay to proceed, including, though, the project. A little bit of clarity is that the way the project's going right now, it looks like we have a partner in it, so it won't be 300. We'll be sharing the 300 with another partner, so it'll be 150. It's still out of the neighborhood. The one struggle, or not struggle, the reality is why we had to leave kind of this side of the bay was because they kind of want to offset habitat with habitat, and so they needed this certain type of mud flat equivalent to be remediated somewhere else, and we didn't have an equivalent project over here. And we did lots of looking through Ducks Unlimited and even CBCL and in discussions with the Passamaquoddy Recognition Group to try to find something a little closer to home, but we were unsuccessful in that.
Thank you, Mr. Spear. Appreciate that update. I do have 2 hands online, even though we can't see them, I'm told. I've got, I'll go to no particular order. I'll go to Councillor Hurdle first.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can I be heard okay?
You can be.
There
And now I can see your hand. It's back up on the screen.
Thanks, everybody. And I just want to again say thank you to everybody's passionate debate about this. Obviously, I feel similarly. And this is one of those situations where agreeing with everybody doesn't really get us anywhere. But from the correspondence we received from the community recently, even though I feel that we were very thorough in our community consultation a couple of years ago when we had public open houses and really made an effort to get out and gather feedback from the community. What I'm hearing now is that maybe slipping away from us in terms of, to use Councillor Neal's words, like there was a settling on what we needed to get done, even though I feel like that's kind of disappearing on us. So one of the things I think maybe we haven't done really well as a council, we've talked about the cost and as specific as we can be about what this is going to look like for the community moving forward into the future and how much this project is going to cost. But we haven't gotten into specifics about what it'll cost if we don't do anything. And even for me, I think I would like to see something concrete and tangible that we can go to the community with to say, okay, if we do nothing, this is the timeline that's going to look like. I know it's a very difficult thing to do because how can we say could be 3 months, could be 3 years, could be 10 years when the wharf is no longer usable in terms of weight restrictions, as Councillor Weir has said as well. It's hard for us to determine those things. But if we could get together sort of a concrete timeline of what this will look like if we don't take action and what the cost will actually be long term if we don't take action, I think that will help us come to a conclusion of what we need to do, which is sort of where I feel like I'm struggling. Like I know we need to do something. The options I don't like, and to use Councillor Neal's, I feel like we've settled on something. But again, hearing from him, I trust his point of view and respect what he's coming to this with as well. And I feel like we need to get this right. We're running out of time to get it right. But what's the cost if we don't?
I know as far as the timeline based on engineers, it could be the next storm. It could be 3 years. There's just engineers aren't going to say this is specifically how long you have left. It's such a storm to storm, hard winter to hard winter, situation to situation. So the cost right now and the risk, I don't think that the wharf's necessarily going to collapse, but the risk is that vehicle soon will not be allowed on that. What soon means, I can't tell you. The engineers won't tell us. It literally could be the next storm. They go and inspect it regularly, right? Is that?
Well, there hasn't been an inspection for a couple of years because of this project, to be honest. We weren't going to keep throwing money on something that might be replaced. We could have them come in, but this will put us deep into the fall before that'll be completed on past experience. And you're right, Your Worship, just for the early part, again, the approach is the one that's the number one concern, and it's the one that's in the worst shape. And, we're continuously pulling logs and stuff out of it. You can see there's, original timbers are all broken and things. They make hard recommendations on stuff we should be fixing now, and we haven't followed that a few years ago. So it's a question of, this project, I'm not saying it's not, but time has literally run out of us to kind of do this exercise again. We did have a series of reports back in between 2018 and 2020, I think, where they came and inspected and provided detailed drawings and explanations of what it would take to repair it. And so we haven't added on that. It's 4 or 5 years later, and we kind of have to, they know the wharf somewhat, but they have to get another engineer to come in and do some various tests and stuff underneath to determine, the viability of it all.
I guess it's also noteworthy, just for Councillor Hurdle's comments, is it's not just the wharf, it's Market Square itself. The concern on Market Square itself underneath needs work, correct?
Correct. We already know that the wooden seawall, there's sediment that's leaving, original materials of gravel and sand that get washed out every storm, and we've had some sinkholes. We've repaired them. And, again, a lot of the funding was related to increasing the height of those things. It's as simple as that. Could we maintain, just replace armor stone at Market Square and call it a day? Yep. Could we repair the wharf? For $3 million, we can look at it, but it's a repair, not a replacement. So you're just putting it down the road that somebody's going to have to do something. Unless you replace every timber, everything, a repair is just generally, duct tape and bubble gum to get you through the thing. If you're going to, well, no, Councillor Neal, but you know what I mean. If you're going to do a full wholesome repair, you're going to have to replace. Well, I know, but you know what I know, but you know what I mean. But my point being is that to extend the life of that thing substantially, there's going to be substantial investment in it, and even their price tag, and I think that might have been pre-pandemic. I want to say 600,000 is the number that rings to top of my head, but I haven't looked at the report for a year. And that's gone up, as you know, substantially because of the pandemic and inflation and all that. We can do all these things, but it means, that the inspection, we've run out of time for that. I can say we can check in with our current firm, we can check in with another firm to do a thing, but it'll be weeks to get them lined up down here and to present a report. And by the time we get a tender together, put it out, we risk not starting the project till November or December, and then we could take the risk of going into next summer with the completion date.
Go to, unless Councillor Hurdle has something else, Councillor Blanchard?
But yeah, just had a quick follow-up on that, if that's all right, if Councillor Blanchard will allow me the luxury. Have we been clear about that, I guess, is what I'm asking. Have we actually come out and sort of said, if we do nothing, then underneath Market Square is going to erode? And if we haven't done a study, what is it that it's exactly going to tell us when it's no longer safe to use? How will we know when that time is? And have we been really clear in articulating to the community what that risk is? Anyway, for me, I feel like we maybe haven't been clear about that piece, and I think that might be worth exploring a little bit more.
I think I don't know.
Yeah,
it's a hard one because, in the past decade, we've lived through where the wharfs had to be closed and had emergency repairs done and things, so it's been a real-life issue. And then once we went down the road to replace, I guess the thoughts of repairing were out of the conversation, to be honest. That the end goal, as led by council, was always to replace. And And so we didn't do a deep dive into just maintaining the status quo, what could we invest to kind of maintain what we have there and move forward.
And yeah, if the message hasn't been out there, I think the consultation, one thing was sure the consultation is doing nothing wasn't an option. That came down to do you want a wharf or not? And I know every time I've been interviewed by CHCO, one of the things I always say is doing nothing is not an option. Natalie's heard me say it a pile of times. So, again, there's always ways that you can market it, but it almost feels like if we're doing that, we're trying to sell the reason we're doing it. You know what I mean? Like we're investing into the reason we're doing it versus why we're doing it, if that makes sense. So whether we do almost a marketing campaign or not, that's just for public opinion. It doesn't really change the situation that's before you. I think I've got Councillor Blanchard. I said next, and I'll go to you, Councillor Harlan.
Thanks, Your Worship. So maybe I'll preface my remarks by saying, sea level rise to me is a real and a serious issue for our community. I guess the question that I have right now is recognizing that we need to do something with respect to sea level rise. Are we able to do that without negatively impacting our neighbors or the neighbors and other properties down on the waterfront? Because as Councillor Neal had indicated, you know, if we're doing something and it's going to have implications, whether it's runoff, freshwater from rainfall, storms, things like that, or soil erosion down the line, or a shoreline erosion rather down the line. I guess are we liable for damages that we cause by changes that we make to the downtown? Based on what we have right now and the information that we have, I'm not able to say yes or no. We will or we won't have an impact on other properties, and to me the major one is changes in the hydrography, changes in the water flow patterns in the harbor. Councillor Neal had mentioned he'd had some conversations with experts down at the biological station. Again, nothing official because no work has been done on this. But certainly, and I've heard the same information, and it does sound like they do believe that there would be, well, it's definitely going to impact the flow of water through there. And again, it's not so much that we're worried about, I don't think we're worried about the impact that current will have on the wharf itself. I mean, I think, you know, the work that is being proposed is being done to withstand the forces. However, in changing those flows and perhaps directing water either back out into the center of the harbor where, again, where you know, there could be an increased amount of sedimentation. Mr. Spear had mentioned earlier about dredging that had been done in the past, and it was good for about 6 months, and then everything was right back to where it was. So I'm just thinking, what if that was to be the case in the center of the harbor, right? Are we significantly and forever altering the water dynamics and what our harbor looks like? And that's just sedimentation. We're not talking about if water is directed back at properties, if we're looking at increased erosion on one side. So that is the piece for me that I'm really struggling with, that one bit of information, because again, if we're making this decision, and it's a big one, it should be done to me with all the information. And I know we have, Mr. Spear had indicated that council, you know, we hadn't given direction for that in the past. None of us are marine engineers. None of us are experts in this field. I honestly, you know, I felt like we were relying on CBCL to provide us and sort of guide us. They were supposed to be the experts in construction. And again, you know, a number of us had mentioned, several of us had mentioned the environmental impact and whether an environmental impact assessment would be required on a project like this. We were told no until, again, I won't call it the 11th hour, because the 11th hour seems to be, we seem to continue to extend out, and it's, you know, so the timeline for this project. But but late in the game, we found out that yes, in fact, it was. So again, there was a piece there where I felt like the experts that we were relying on didn't provide us the best advice. And I'm really concerned that we're, again, in a situation where we don't have all the information. And that's the piece that I'm really struggling with. Recognizing and again, and I'll mention one other piece too, like, because it has been talked about, if we're just looking at repairs, if we're just looking at repair and the cost of that, as opposed to the other pieces that we, and Councillor Neal had mentioned, we sort of focused on the additional funding that is available to us if we're looking at mitigating sea level rise. There's definitely something to that, and none of us want to turn away free money, but if the changes, I just don't know if I'm comfortable right now with the proposal to accommodate or to include the sea level rise, the changes to respond to sea level rise. The changes that we have to make there, I think, will significantly alter the flow dynamics, the water flow in the harbor. And I don't know what the result of that will be, and that's the piece I'm really struggling with right now. If we didn't incorporate the sea level rise changes and basically the raising of Market Square and the approach, and we just focused on the wharf repair and making it repairing what we have, again, so we can remove the weight restrictions, things of that nature, what would the cost breakdown be for just that piece? Now, I say that still recognizing that sea level rise is a major issue. I'm not clear on how we're going to, I'm not clear on what we're going to do moving forward to address that, where we have so many private land owners along the waterfront. How do we have to do something, and I still think that perhaps our focus should be on the point where we do have critical infrastructure. And I'm speaking of the sewage treatment facility, which we know, based on the modeling that's been done by the province, is at risk in the future with sea level rise and storm surge. The same as Market Square and sections of Water Street where water could push up. There's risk there as well. I'm just unclear on how that one section that we do at the Wharf, while it may protect Market Square to a certain extent, what is it going to do to the areas that are surrounding it or adjacent to it on either side, right? And the other properties along the shoreline there. So I'm really struggling right now in terms of where we are and how we go forward. Wanting to move forward to protect the infrastructure, to protect Market Square, but unsure about what we're proposing, how that will impact others, and whether it has a negative impact there. Without that piece at some kind of a study or a modeling exercise, or the modeling which would be done to demonstrate and show how the flow patterns are going to and what changes we could potentially expect in the harbor and on shoreline erosion, I'm really having a hard time saying I can get behind what we have right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Blanchard. Appreciate those comments. Councillor Harland.
I'm very overwhelmed. This has continued to generate a significant amount of discussion in the community. I'm sure I am not the only councillor around this table who gets lots of opinions around this. I have no idea. I really have no idea. I don't know. I have people who say it won't affect significantly erosion, and they're adamant about it. I have very schooled colleagues who have lots of significant questions, and I think if they have questions, I need to have those answers to help me make a decision. So I'm really at a loss. The question I did have was, because one of the issues that faces us in terms of next steps is the tendering, right? Putting it out to tender. If we were to put it out to tender just to get that process started, because it may put us way over the mark and it's dead in the water, period. Putting it out to tender doesn't mean that we are held to anything. Is that correct? Okay. I believe I need more information to understand. I do not feel, as a counselor, that I have, unfortunately, faith in the direction that CBCL has provided us. I'm not sure who we would need to bring in to answer some of these questions, but I do believe that we need a little more consultation. However, I would also like to see us proceed with the tendering process, while at the same time seeing if we can get some kind of answers to all of this. I concur 100%. For me, doing nothing is not an option. Making the wharf a pedestrian wharf, I think will have huge impact, economic impact on this community. And I don't want to see that happen. So I don't know if there's a way that we can do some parallel planning so that we can put it out to tender and at least understand if the cost is going to put us dead in the water, while at the same time trying to get some clear answers on some of the questions around the potential erosion. For me, I would prefer a two-pronged approach.
I'll go 1 sec. Just on that, how long would maybe you're not able to answer that, Mr. Spear. How long would such a study take to complete?
No idea. But we're talking, I'm sure, months. Most firms are 6 months before they can accept new work. So it won't be quick, and it's an intense. I'm not entirely sure if CBCL themselves could do that. I'd have to double check with that, but that's a pretty specialized field of work. I do want to mention, if I could, Your Worship, just respond to a couple of comments.
For sure.
So one is about the adjacent property. So the problem we're going to have, no matter what, is that whoever's the first project to go ahead and combat sea level rise is going to affect neighboring properties. It just is. So everybody does nothing or everybody does something. It just, as you create these barriers, and even the DFO and stuff have said that too, there's been other areas where the same thing has occurred. Really what it comes down to is unique in St. Andrews is our wharf is in the center of a town, which is kind of unusual. And so there's, Water Street is right there, and there's a whole bunch of adjacent property owners with buildings close to the water and stuff. So it makes our particular area that much more of a challenge. I do want to defend CBCL a little bit here from this standpoint. I know about the remediation part of it. They didn't give good advice. We had asked, they didn't think it would. They came back. But as far as the original concepts, we went through multiple 5, 6, 7 different concepts over years, following council's lead, and they provided things. I mean, the only thing we could have done short was to go back and do what's called like an expression of interest or something, where you have a design and build, where you just say, here's our problem, tell us how much it's going to cost to fix it. Part of the thing, too, that has driven what we have now is cost. There's no doubt about it. We looked at some of the ones that are more aesthetically pleasing, and they were substantially more money. So, council was told that, and because of the funding was locked in of what we had, they went kind of with the option that we could afford. So, from CBCL's perspective, they did what they could on the actual project. As far as like if we take the project we have now, we can do a modeling study. If we abandon the project we have now, there's no sense of doing a modeling study from this perspective, because the modeling study's on what's the project going to be. So it's a kind of a I don't know, chicken and egg scenario, I guess. I don't know exactly how to put it besides that. And so, and we can repair the wharf and keep it going. The big thing about this was, for the same money, the cost to repair it, or slightly more, we're going to get a completely refurbished facility that would last 50 to 75 years. That was kind of the whole thing from the beginning, that if we do repairs now, we're probably 15 to 25 years down the road, somebody's going to have to do a substantial repair to that wharf again. Staff are fine with that, but that was kind of the early indications of why we went with this funding. Yes, the climate change thing threw a bit of a monkey wrench in it because everything had to be raised, but that was the funding that came forward. Our original application was rejected by Infrastructure Canada. Then during the pandemic, they released a whole bunch of funding under recreation and this climate change adaptation, and so we had to raise it by $500,000 in order to qualify for the funding. That's kind of to the point where we have now. We'll follow council's direction, but just kind of need to know if it's this or if it's just to arrange an inspection and start going through that process, and then seeing what it's going to cost to keep the wharf going for another decade or better, or however it is. I mean, no one knows at the end, but to do substantial repair, to lift the weight restrictions, to reinforce everything that's falling apart, to do the end of the piles, to make sure those don't fall into disrepair and present structural integrity issues, and move forward. I don't have a figure on my head anymore. It probably would have been a couple of $1 million, but that's just off the top of my head with the deterioration we've got now on the approach, plus the work that should be done on the pier head at the end of the wharf.
And one thing that I have thrown around town hall and conversations in the past, and again, it's not necessarily what I'd say is the number one option, but we keep going back to it. But there is the option as well of using this funding right now, quickly adjusting, putting armor stone around the existing Market Square, fix that up, and don't touch the wharf right now. Reapply with a different engineering firm to come up with more ideas on what the wharf potential solution could be. You're not fixing the wharf, but you're using some of this $5.4 million to shore up Market Square, which we know needs to be done. And if you're just shoring that up and not adding a significant amount of infill, I think we could all agree that we have to protect that Market Square. It's no different than I see on the Glebe Road when I go, and if you've ever walked around the beach there, multiple property owners have armor stone now on their property to stop erosion and to shore it up. So the $5.4 million, it wouldn't be that much, but it would be within the budget. And then you go back to the drawing board on the wharf. Is it a gamble? Yes, it is a gamble. I know people don't like to hear that, but it is a gamble. There is a weight restriction on the wharf. It doesn't mean it's tomorrow. I can't tell you. No one can tell you. But then you go back and you reapply, essentially, and go through the process with another engineering firm and really dig down to find one that specializes in a number of, such projects all across the world or Canada, and you reapply. And again, that's a gamble because there's no guarantee you'll get funding on it. But at least out of this $5.4 million, you're at least addressing Market Square and making sure that you're stopping the erosion there, the sinkholes, because that does need work as well. It's not just the wharf. Market Square also needs the wharf. So that is just another option. We definitely know we have the budget to do that. It doesn't extend Market Square, but maybe Market Square doesn't need to be extended. The only real concern that I see of Market Square right now, the way that it sits today, is the town of St. Andrews actually does not own much land for a right-of-way for fire trucks to get into Market Square for the buildings that are there. Technically speaking, that is not the town of St. Andrews land. When you drive in behind the post office, they don't even, I believe, own 10 feet. So just saying that's a challenge you can work around, and I'm sure Councillor Neal could probably say they could probably come the other way by the red herring if they had to, and down there. I'm not sure. You can speak to it, but
we've gotten in there in the past, recent past.
But I'm just saying, like, say the post office wants to expand on the footprint of their land. It's something that could happen, right? I'm just putting it out there, right? It's their land, not our land. But to your point, it is a curb, and I'm pretty sure a fire truck could get over curb if it had to. Mm-hmm. I'm just putting that out there as another option. Use this money to shore up Market Square, go back to the drawing board. And again, I know there's risk with it, but doing nothing at all, there's risk to that as well, right? So there's risk in everything is what I'm hearing. And that's why I keep going back to saying there isn't a good option, but I'm yet to hear a good option from anybody, the public around this table, any engineer. I haven't heard an idea that I've looked at and said I'd like to. In a perfect world, that wharf could stay just the way it is for the next 1,000 years. But the reality is that is not an option for us. It's just not. Councillor Heenan.
Yes, Your Worship. I would like to put this out to the public. First off, I want to say I really enjoy all this bannering we're having over the wharf because it is a magnitude and it is very, very important. The one thing that I can tell you from a layman's personal viewpoint is you take a kayak and you go under the wharf and you have yourself a look up. And when you can see the belly of a dog walking because there's holes and there's pieces eroded on the wharf, I'll tell you, I have never driven my car out there since I went for the kayak ride last summer. And we want to talk about liability? You wait till a string of people go out to go whale watching and something gives. You want to see liability? We'll see it then. Because I'm telling you, it's rotten. There's nothing holding that wharf up. I took 3 geology courses and I would close it tomorrow if it was up to me, because I don't believe it's safe. And so we can have erosion, we can have whatever, but if we're going to have a wharf, we're going to have to do something, because this wharf is not going to last. And I once again reiterate, I will not take my SUV with a dog out to the end of the pier any longer after I went for the kayak ride last year. And so I'm just telling you now that whatever we do, we either have to do it soon or close it. That's my opinion. Thank you.
And before we go to Councillor Neal, just to let you know that proposal I said, we still would have to go back to our funding partners. Councillor Neal.
Thank you. Again, this has been a great discussion. I've been making some notes here. There's a couple things I wanted to touch on and just clarify. First point being, I am in no way suggesting that we do nothing. Something absolutely has to be done about the wharf. I just don't think this is the solution. There is a weight restriction on the wharf. Throughout this entire process, no one has ever come to us and said the wharf is imminently about to be closed. I too have walked underneath it. I know a couple engineers that have walked underneath it, and timbers can be replaced. There is a weight restriction. The weight restriction is on a very, very small portion of the approach. At least it was a couple of years ago when the fire department started with our backup plan for dragging hoses out there. I don't know the exact dimensions of it, but I would say it's no more than 10 square meters. I drive it almost every day, all summer long. They're structurally, yes, timbers need to be replaced. Sea level rise, absolutely an issue, but as Councillor Blanchard pointed out, again, you know, where do you start? Again, how as a town do we start? You know, we say we are going to start, we're going to pick one spot. How do we get everybody else on the shore, on the shoreline to do the same? It just doesn't work. I'm sorry. The water is going to find a way off at either side. I don't dispute Councillor Heenan's claims about what went on in Shediac. I saw some of the footage myself. The major difference in Shediac is it's exposed. The harbor in St. Andrews is not exposed. We are not, the wharf does not get hammered with massive storm surge. The erosion that's taking place under Market Square, yes, that happens daily with the tide coming and going. The best option I have heard so far is what the mayor just spoke of. Again, we can protect Market Square by simply lining the existing shorefront with armor rock to mitigate that erosion that's happening underneath the square, and the approach can be repaired. Yes, it is not a replacement. Yes, it's not the 70-year solution. But, you know, every time something breaks on my car, I'd love to replace it with a new one, but sometimes it's just not an option. Sometimes I just got to go and get the brakes fixed. To me, it's no different. The wharf, again, is structurally sound for the most part, but it needs repair, and it's going to continue to need repair. And that is to the point that I was making earlier about having a prolonged, again, asset management plan for the wharf and the town that doesn't put a financial burden on the taxpayers, and we're not hit with these all or nothing sort of repair bills. There's no doubt in my mind that a couple $100,000, maybe even $1 million, could replace a significant number of the structural timbers under that wharf. It happens every day on wharfs all over the Maritimes. There isn't a day in the summer where a wharf isn't being repaired. Again, I spend most of my time on the water. So again, that to me, that is the best option I've heard. Again, nobody has said the wharf's about to close. It's not pick this option or the wharf disappears forever. Again, a couple of us suggested we get that second opinion, which I'm now hearing again. For a project of this magnitude, again, I think we should have done it a long time ago. We should have asked for another engineering company to come in and give us a repair cost, which we have not had. We've had a quote from CBCL, which was called a repair, but it was basically a replacement at the same time. We have not had anybody come in and walk underneath that wharf structurally and say, yes, we can start replacing timbers. The weight restriction is removed, and maybe it's not 70 years, maybe it's 10 years. But financially, it is a much better approach than the $3 million changing our harbor front forever, which again is irreversible, and the complete unknown of what's going to come with the next 2/3 of the wharf.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Neal. And just for clarity, I knew that you doing nothing wasn't an option for you as well. It seemed it was just so the public is aware this isn't happening for no reason. Something does have to happen, right? But sorry if it did sound like you were saying that. I don't know if I said it or someone else, but okay, perfect. Councillor Ware.
Yes, I'd just like to echo that also, in that something has to be done. And we talked about wrapping some of the piles. I talked to one of the gentlemen at the Port of St. John who looks after the maintenance or the upkeep of the wharf down there. They wrapped some piles back in the 1980s, and they are still structurally sound and still performing the way they should. You know, and that's 45 years ago. So this pile wrapping, a lot of people have never heard of it, but it's wonderful how it works. And not that bad as far as cost goes. And if you had have started 8-10 years ago wrapping piles, wouldn't be a pile problem at this point in time. But something has to be done. But my concern is that the taxpayers get value for their money, and we get the desired result at a reasonable cost. And some people will say the cost is not reasonable, but the cost of repairing wharfs is extremely expensive. So it's going to be unreasonable for a lot of people. But it's a matter of getting into a routine where the wharf is kept at a level that it's safe for everyone and serves the purpose it was designed for. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. We've deliberated on this for years, the wharf, and we fix a little problem and then we keep fixing the little problems. And I don't believe that we cannot not do anything. We have to do something, but it's the something that we can't find the agreement for everybody, and we're not going to please everybody. But what we want to keep is that our wharf doesn't become a walking wharf only. We want it to be usable, viable wharf that it is, because it does bring a lot of tourists and a lot of industry to St. Andrews to keep us going. So that being said, I don't know if you staff need to have that RFP, or is that what you're looking for tonight? I guess I have a question. Is that what you want us to do, is to do the RFP, or do you have a suggestion like that? I think...
right now, we have no direction, I think it's fair to say. Okay. We've had lots of opinions.
Yeah.
They're all valuable. We just need to know if we cease this, that's fine.
Yeah.
I do want something of clarity, though, Your Worship. You said about using some of the money for Market Square, but we have to raise it if you're going to do that. So you're still going to get a bit of infill and stuff, just so you understand.
I don't think anyone could argue that rising sea levels is real. Like, you have to go up. Like, there's no point fixing it the exact same way, and storms continue to hit us over the next 50 years and continue to come into Market Square. You do have to raise seawalls, and that's exactly, we talk about Indian Point, we're not doing that for no reason either. That is because of the projections of sea level rise. So whenever we're replacing something, we have to respect that. You have to. So that, to me, would meet the project criteria. It's a change in scope of the project. It doesn't mean it's guaranteed, but it still would be, it's funding for sea level rise, essentially, for St. Andrews, for climate change adaptation. Market Square, putting Arborstone in and raising it, would still meet the merit of the program, and just let them know that the wharf, we just aren't prepared to commit. I don't know if they'll approve it or not. We've already asked to change it a couple times.
But it's going to be a little easier, Sal, because when we got the extra funding a couple of years ago, they actually split the project into two phases, Market Square and Market Wharf. So that should be a little easier, especially if we're kind of maintaining the same design. I'll have to talk to them a little bit, but I think the chances are, yeah, if you do that one, it's two separate projects instead of all tied into one mega project.
And by the way, I still have to get consensus on that, just to be clear on that one. So I will say this, that if you're looking to have kind of the study done of actually, the currents and the impacts on this, there's no point going to tender if you're not going to have the results of that, because you're wasting a bunch of companies' times and resources. It's very expensive on a project like this, and you got to go, if you're going to put that out there, you got to go in good faith. And if this council doesn't think they're going to do it, then we don't go ahead and ask companies to do that. And in fairness, when you are prepared to fix that wharf and you do that a few times, you're not going to get them. They're going to say, nope, that's a mess down there. And then you get stuck with one bid that's way over because they're like, oh, they probably won't do it anyway. It'll impact your bid price. So if you're going to go out and get that, you should be darn sure that you're ready to go ahead with the project. And that's just good business.
And Your Worship, just if I will too, I think if we go for like larger repairs, which is fine, but we probably will abandon any future major refurbishment of the wharf. If we've got, you don't want to put $1.5 million in to rip it out, 5 years down the road even, I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do. I'm just saying just to be aware that if we go the repair route, that'll kind of settle that we're okay with the design we have now and just continue with that indefinitely until we determined what's next steps.
It was just a follow-up because we did get on a side conversation. Yeah, go ahead. Then I'll go to you after.
I think that if we could do the wrapping of the poles, which has lasted for a while, and do some of that repair of the wharf so you don't see the holes when you go underneath with your kayak or walk underneath of it, I think that would benefit the wharf lasting a little bit longer for the time being, since our mandate is closing. But I'd like to see the next council not have such a heavy burden of the wharf. Thank you.
Councillor Heenan.
Yes, Your Worship. In fun, I would like to comment on Councillor Neal's car analogy about that you can't always buy a new one, but at some point they become a junker, and you end up walking. So you really at some point you have to buy a new car or you walk. And so I don't believe that we need to put brakes on it. I believe we need the whole engine repaired. And if we're going to do that, we might as well buy a new car. Thank you.
All right, Council, somehow I'm going to try. Oh, Councilor Goumichel.
Just quickly to reiterate, so if we decide not to put out the tender documents now, we're essentially turning our back on how much in funding to repair the wharf? $5.4 million?
About 5 million, because we've already gotten 400,000 during the design phase, but yeah.
Just for clarity. Thank you.
About 5, so the original was about 5.4, I think. And we used a portion of that as the work's gone on already to date, that we've recovered some of the claims during the design phase.
So the headline might read, council turns back on 5.4 million. Just clarify.
Councilor Ware. It's an important issue. I'm not going to shut down conversation tonight.
Mr. Spear, you say turn our back on the 5 million, but there is a possibility of reworking the funding that we could get a substantial portion towards what we do decide to do.
So it's a two-part question. So if we're just basically putting a little bit of armor stone at the end of Market Square, that's not going to cost anything in the overall scheme of things. We're talking less than $200,000. A big proportion of the cost of that was the infill of the whole structure to meet the wharf. So, you know, that's not a big cost, so we'll recover some of that. The wharf is probably off the table without increasing the height of it. We'll have to bore it. We can go back and reapply under a different funding arrangement, and RDC has helped us in the past, but it's going to be deferred however long it takes, and with the current climate, with the government and this, you know, I don't know how much spending there's going to be like there was. It could be great. They could, you know, back up a couple of truckloads of money and say, yeah, that's a good idea. But I guess I don't know if it's repairs or if council wants to revision. And again, even if you don't like this design, just remember, if you do something, even replacing the wooden wharf was $10 million or something. So repairs is about our cheapest option, there's no doubt about it. It defers the work for whatever, a couple of decades probably at the most. And we can just do, as we said, we won't be able to address climate change probably in a meaningful way, or if we're not going to start the process now, and as Councillor Neal has said, and we had a discussion even as part of this AIM project, it's a problem everywhere that how do you know, if one proponent starts addressing climate change, the neighbors are going to feel the effects of it to a certain extent. There's no easy solution unless the town had hundreds of $millions to do the whole waterfront.
Just on that point, over a couple decades, if you repair it, I think in a couple decades you're going to have a pretty good idea of what the end of the wharf looks like then too. And then your project's syncing up a little bit to say, can this town afford the wharf going forward at that point? And then everyone that says you got to have a plan for the whole thing, it's closer in sync. I do think the end of the wharf's probably, it was the 90s when it was in the 90s when it was.
It's never, except for the wrapping, it's never been considered an issue. And we did bring up the wrapping well before this council's time, but this project has sort of delayed everything for a long time as we waited for this funding and final decisions on design and stuff. But even the wrapping, we might be able to talk them into that. That might be a little bit harder. Again, everything was tied into the climate change adaptation. Without that, it's hard to say what they'll say, but first thing tomorrow, I'll email them and just get an idea of what their thoughts are on that.
Just because if this solution basically lasts 20 years, the municipality, the end of the wharf will be about 50 years old then. Starting to feel older, but it will be about 50 years old, and there'll be starting to be some questions on the end of that wharf at 50 years, I would assume. Like based on the life cycle of what they gave us for the wood, we went that option, based on their projections that they gave us for the approach and our option and our decision making. In 50 years' time, it's pretty close that the council will be pretty much have a better idea at the time of what they're facing.
But, sorry, Councillor, but it goes back to what Councillor Neal was saying, he's right. Taking climate change out of the scenario, I'm not saying, I think we shouldn't, but let's just say we take it out of the scenario, we could put hundreds of thousands of dollars every few years into the wharf, probably maintain that for another 100 years, truthfully. That, it goes back to the car scenario, that if you're replacing things time to get the oil changes done, replacing the brakes, and, slowly replacing everything that's underneath there won't be anything to fall apart because everything's going to be recycled new in a planned approach. The problem we've had is staff has routinely brought this up before council. It's always been pushed down the road, so it's an excellent plan, but it depends on future councils to follow your ways of thoughts, and it's just in the political environment, that's a hard thing to guarantee.
Councillor Heaton.
It's me again. So I just need to know, Your Worship, that all that exercise we did for 3 months on relocating a whale watching spot, that we all agreed on how we were going to do that. There was no mention of any of this. We were all set. And unless I miss my guess, we spent 3 months of Monday nights going over and over and over. And now we're saying we're not going to do it? I mean, I don't get it. I really am going to say I don't get it. Why did we do all of that if we're not going to do the wharf? Why didn't we say we're not doing it then? And we'd have saved ourselves a whole bunch of stress and a whole bunch of work that was totally unnecessary. So we as a council sat around this table for 3 months and talked about this. We argued back and forth. We did everything we had to do to make this work. And now we're abandoning it. I'm lost. I'm sorry, but I'm lost, Your Worship.
Yeah, so just on that, just to be clear, I don't have consensus yet that we're abandoning it. There's mixed perspectives here. My perspectives, probably if you're watching, it's all over the place. My job as the mayor is to roll with this table and, the plan. I'm prepared to talk about why this council selected it, but I'm also prepared to talk about why this council changed their mind. And the beautiful thing about processes is, there's business plans that happen every day as, big business plans, and the business gets to a certain point and it's time to make a decision. And for reason X, Y, Z, they decide it's not the best thing for the business. And what I'm hearing around this table is, yes, there was consensus to your point. Majority of council kept going down this line. I don't know what consensus is now, but if consensus changes based on conversations, based on public feedback, based on a whole number of factors, then this council does have the right to make the decision they feel is best for this community. And I think that people may not all agree on this. The real shame of all this is it would have been really good to get all this public feedback over a year ago. This was a year and a half ago, right? Like we would have had time to even look at the tidal flow then. But what happened is, and I asked one of the main proponents that was against this proposal, and they decided to go to the federal government to try to get it rejected. And it wasn't rejected. Basically, the response was they do projects like this all the time, and it's not required. And that doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but that is why now you're hearing more from the public, is because it was unsuccessful with the federal government. And that is what came out of me, because I was confused by why now, why when we've incurred engineer costs, why we're almost ready, 100% drawings, we're about to go to tender, why now? At least that explains to me why it's now. That helps you understand why this is coming from. The main proponent was working with the federal government to try to get this rejected, but the federal government did not do that. To them, this is again, for us, it's very significant. For them, it's actually a pretty common project. And I'm not taking away the impacts on the flow, on neighboring properties and all that, but for them, like in the scope what they do sometimes demand that this is done, but usually it's for far significantly larger projects. There was one in Prince Edward Island, for example, that required it, right? So there is other projects that require this. That is why you're hearing the noise now, and I don't know if that's necessarily. I've got to give Councillor Neal, I'll point to him, and not to say that Councillor Ware wasn't, he expressed concerns. Councillor Neal, to me, has been very, very consistent, and he was very at the remediation, too, for the level. So I think there's been some concerns around the table throughout the process, but we operate as a whole, and if the whole says this changes, that's when I will happily go and sit down with Natalie on the couch and talk about it. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. And I guess, first of all, I guess I really appreciate everybody's passion in this, and everybody seems to be very opinionated, but yet we're still having a very civil conversation about this. So that's quite wonderful, given the subject and how important it is to everybody. Mr. Spear, if I could ask, you just said a few minutes ago, you were talking about the $400,000 that's already been paid out for like the engineering drawings and all the work that CBCL and everything is done. So if we decide not to go forth with this, and the fact that you've already received the funding from the project for $400,000, does that mean we're on the hook to pay the government back for that $400,000?
Not from my understanding, because they've said this happens all the time, that, not with Wharf projects, but the number one killer of projects is budget, where they go through the whole design process of things even less controversial, if I can use the word as this, and then they get the budget, it's 3 times what they thought it was going to be, and the proponents have to abandon it. So that shouldn't be an issue.
So if we, sorry, can I continue?
No, by all means. That was a question I had, the exact same question, so by all means.
So if we decide to go a route like what the mayor was talking, then that means a whole new set of drawings for the rebuilding of Market Square, the shoring up of rocks, whatever. So that's another probably $300,000 or $400,000 in engineering drawings.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, you've got the basis, because on these drawings, the Market Wharf has looked a little different. Well, no, I have to take it back, because you got to back up the fill. But I guess depending what council wants to do, we might even do that with just a contractor, to be honest, because, there's contractors around the area that do this routinely, that, we had to include an engineer because of a lot of the work with the raising and all that stuff, but depending if it's just reinforcing or raising it a little bit, because even when we say raising, it doesn't necessarily mean we're raising all of Market Square. We might be able to get 1.5 foot, because right now, as you know, Market Square is basically flat with the railing, so we might be able to get the height of the railing with just armor stone. So I'd have to kind of think about it after the fact and see how much engineering we would specifically need, if that's just a little thing. The other cost would be the inspection costs. Those are manageable. I'm going to say $20,000 or less, likely, to do an inspection underneath, probably less, whoever you get, and to provide advice to us on next steps.
With all respect to our contractors, I think it would be essential, especially when you have other levels of government being funding partners, that we get the engineers to look at it, because the last thing you want to do is have this start crumbling down, you know what I mean, be the wrong angle. Although it's significantly of a less cost project, it still could have impacts on the look and feel of our downtown. So to get the engineer to weigh in, and if we're going brand new, I would get a brand new engineer. I think it's worthwhile.
Your Worship, sorry, 2 questions for clarification. As it comes, and this is for council, as it comes to Market Square, would you be looking at it to be just repaired and maintained as is, or would council be looking at some sort of aspect to look at gaining more access to Market Square as discussed by the fire truck? If there's clarification that council can provide that way, at least then we'll have a bit more direction as to what council is looking at.
What I was proposing to get it over to council was to just use the existing space that is there today without significantly changing, I guess you could say, the shape of our Market Square. And the other thing is, if I recall, when we did all this changes, the armor stone stopped at the corner of the Day Adventure Center. With the savings, I would wrap it around at an angle that engineers approve right to the edge of our public land. Because remember, it was a little gap that was short on the back of the Day Adventure Center. We're saving a significant amount of money. You would do the whole thing. To do that all but that never really made sense to me. But, with budget and what it is, I think you shore up all of our property. And, also as part of the engineering is versus a contractor is I'd want to make sure that proper drainage, to Councillor Neal's point, coming down, that there's a plan for water coming down the hill to be able to properly drain as well. That's why you'd look for an engineer.
Your Worship, just back to that, I hadn't responded, but there was on the plans, there's going to be storm drains. So if you look at them, the sloping of that was actually, there's a storm drain there now. So that had been worked into these plans. There is going to be, no doubt, a little bit of residual, because when something's higher, you can't get 100% of the rain to flow towards the center, but for the most part, the rain's going to be captured into our current storm sewer system.
So again, that's why you'd want to make sure it's still engineered. Yeah. Councilor Ireland?
So I'm assuming, based on this conversation tonight, that staff would go away and compile options?
Nope. And that's not the direction we've received right now. Well, I have five
They don't have
options.
direction yet. I haven't got any consensus yet. Right now, everyone's...
I know, and my fear is that, I don't know about how anyone else is feeling, but I'm feeling quite overwhelmed with information. And if you're going to ask us to vote in a direction, I would find that very difficult without having some time to reflect and synthesize through what potential options there are. I'm not sure how any of my colleagues are feeling, but
That's tabling is an option, just to be clear as well. But with that being said, we're getting closer and closer to tabling means we're not doing it this year, right? Like that's and not to put the pressure on, but this all came in our 23 hours and 30 minutes. It's the 24th hour, right? Like it's coming down to the end, right? So it's going to feel rushed, whether it be this week, next week. We can't wait 2 months. Councillor Blanchard.
You're on mute, Councillor Blanchard.
Sorry about that. So for to be perfectly clear then, so in terms of a study of water flow through that area with the current project as it exists, are we in a position to say that can't possibly happen under the current sort of trajectory that we're on in terms of when things would go to tender, when we could, all that kind of stuff? Like, what are sort of, I know we can't say for sure, but do we have even a sense of how long that would take to have that information? That to me is a key piece of information that has been raised now by a number of people in town. And when I'm asked that question, with my background, I guess, I feel like I should be able to answer that question. And to be honest, I can't. And I've had conversations with colleagues, former colleagues, who have, again, not being able to say what exactly it would look like, but are quite convinced that it would have an impact on water flow in the harbor and sedimentation. So that is, I'm not opposed to the current design, to be clear. I feel it's important, especially given the discussion we've had around climate change. But that piece of the puzzle, to me, and not knowing what impact it would have on the harbor and the waterfront itself is sort of making it really difficult for me to move forward with the current design, just without having that piece of information. With it, and as long as everything looked okay, then I would be on board with it. But that's the piece that I'm struggling with right now. So do we have a sense of, to go for that, to get that study, do we have a sense of the impact it would have on the current process? Are we looking now another year out? Are we looking now, that it would be another council, or do we have a sense of what would happen?
Here's what I'm proposing. I go to you, Councillor Neal, too. But what I'm proposing is we're meeting next Monday. Why don't we give Mr. Spear to reach out to professionals to give the timeline to what that would take, just to make sure. And then we come back next Monday. You've had another week, not a lot of time, and then we revisit this. Thoughts, Council? Councillor Neal?
Yeah, just having worked on a few of these projects, I can tell you it will take months. I mean, typically, oceanographers would want to model currents for several months. In the past, we've done it basically spring through fall.
Yeah, and we couldn't get anyone lined up like tomorrow type of thing and get it done in 2 or 3 weeks. And so, and again, with our current design, we're so to the last minute. The government said you had to commit so much work this year and so much work next year, for their own budgets. So it's not even like we can push everything for 2026, their March year end, into in the 27 year end. So it gets horrifically complicated, but I would agree with Councillor Neal that I know engineering firms are months and months behind everywhere. So once I found someone who could do the job, and then to get their timeline, I'm sure it would be well into the fall before they could even start. But I don't mind making a few calls and confirming that, but that's what my initial gut reaction is. But your worship, I guess it
even...
even...
week's not going to make a difference. It's not going to...
Well, next Monday's not a regular session at council either, your worship.
I'd call a special meeting though, right?
True.
We don't do that very often. It's worth a special meeting. Councillor Ware. Easy for me to say though, right?
No, I concur.
knew you'd all appreciate that. Councillor Ware.
I concur with that 100%. I need a couple of days to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and think about this for a couple hours and digest it all. And I think Mr. Spear and Mr. Knoppers, I think they got to digest what has gone on here tonight. And I don't think any of us are prepared to, or I hope none of us are prepared to make a hard and fast decision here tonight.
Just quick show of hands. How many want to wait until next Monday? We'll call a special meeting and discuss it again. Okay. And I'm sure people are tired of watching my volcano of a nose continue to...
Your worship, though,
just not stop.
Councillor Harland had some more questions. I guess for questions right now, I've got a tidal action survey, or hydrology survey, I guess is the fancy word. Follow-up on inspection costs, what that would be. Is there any other questions councils have? I'm not going to get them all, I'm sure, for next week, but at least what we're aiming for. So one is how much it's going to cost and timing of to model the hydrology of the project. Then also just to find out how much a wholesome inspection of the wharf to provide a repair cost to lift the weight restrictions and all that would do, the timing cost, etc.
Would that include like the wrapping of the boat?
It could, but that's pretty much a given at this point in time. We could have them redo it since they're out here. They just have a little caliper thing they put on just to compare the size of the original steel with what's left.
Would that be done by a separate engineering company?
It's council's discretion. Engineering doesn't require normal procurement procedures as the Procurement Act of the Province of New Brunswick.
It would be my suggestion that we'd have, again, that second opinion. Look at the underside of the wharf and, again, address just that, removing the weight restriction and shoring up the timbers underneath.
I'm good with that as well. Or at least go to two options and see what they say about how long it takes, and then we go back to it. Councillor Edith?
I'm just wondering if there's been any studies done on the water movement within our harbor of recent times. No?
Not locally, no.
Not locally, okay. I just was thinking if there was. Thank you.
No, I asked that question of the scientists I spoke to.
Yeah, well, even if so, though, they have to model the new infill. So the old data would be useful, but the modeling would have to be based on their projections of what's being infilled.
All right, I think I've got consensus on that one. We still have another item. So we'll move on. We'll revisit it next week. Let's call a special meeting before I guess call it the zoning bylaw meeting. All right, the next one is...
Your worship?
Yeah.
Sorry, just to back up. I'm wondering if we should postpone the zoning bylaw. I mean, you've seen how long this has taken tonight. Maybe not, maybe it'll be quick, but...
Sure. There's no timeline on the zoning bylaw other than we'd like to have it in place, so I don't see any reason why we would. Council, you feel good with that?
Yes.
I'd say this is a more pressing issue right now.
Yeah, okay.
All right, the next one I'll pass back over to Mr. Spear again. Oh,
Page 30, Councillor Neal.
My mistake.
All right.
Yes, sorry.
Give me a
Sorry
moment.
about that.
I'll find it here. Okay, this is reference number PWPS 250513, and the subject is the Argyle Residence Sidewalk Decision. So again, the background reads, council was provided with a presentation from John Rocca this evening, Ellerdale Ventures Incorporated, as it relates to an option for the sidewalk adjacent to the new Argyle residence on Water Street. Being proposed is a new sidewalk space with a proposed slope of 5 to 7%. The developer has been able to meet the barrier-free access under the building code within their building structure. Based on what has been proposed and reviewed by town staff and engineers, it's recommended that council approves this sidewalk option. So the motion before us reads that the council of the town of St. Andrews approves the new sidewalk construction adjacent to Argyle residence at 260 Water Street with Ellerdale Ventures, Inc., and direct the chief administrative officer to finalize an agreement. And I will so move this.
Seconder, please. Got Councillor Heaton, discussion. Councillor Neal.
Again, sorry, yeah, just to reiterate basically what I asked Mr. Rocca. Again, anything we could do to reduce that, the side slope from the building down, I think would be very advantageous. As I mentioned, again, I did look it up, a couple different standards, and again, anything really above 2% slope going across it is not really considered accessible. So anything we can do to minimize that, I think would be beneficial.
Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to recap here, in the background, it reads with a proposed slope of 5 to 7 degrees, 7%. Sorry, but in the proposal that was we were given tonight, the steepest was 4.38. So I think that in the background it should read.
It should be reading under 5%. When I originally made the report, it was looking at some of the documents, but it should be under 5%.
Let's do an amendment on that.
Your Worship, you wouldn't have to do an amendment on the background. It's the amendment on a motion.
Oh, sorry, the motion's still fine.
The motion's still fine.
So just we'll note that in the minutes then. All right. Any other? Councillor Heaton. Yeah, anyone can, absolutely.
Thank you, Worship. This means that we still own the sidewalk. I know that's a dumb question, but we still own the sidewalk. Even if he does all the work on it, we still own it, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor of this motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And opposed? No. Seeing one nay, Councillor Neal. That has been carried. Okay, nothing under new business. Question period. We'll start. Anyone online?
I have no one left online, and I've received no emails to this point. So if you want to go to the audience, you're more than welcome.
Anyone in the audience have any questions related to this evening's agenda?
Sims, I have a quick question, and it's Mr. Knight in his presentation mentioned B-roll. I don't know what B-roll means. Can somebody explain that?
Yeah, so it's a term used in marketing. So you see it a lot in movies. You see like people will come and just shoot images of the oceans, of attractions. It's just almost stuff you can use for later opportunities. But really, it's stock footage of attractions, probably accommodations, food, stuff that will give material to do future marketing. So it's like an inventory of shots of your community that they can use at a later date. I know that from my movie career. More radio. All right. Any other questions? Okay, that wraps up questions. Councillor, Deputy Mayor's comments. Deputy Mayor.
Just keep those bags coming in for the home, not homes, but the food banks. They have used up all the bags that we brought in, but to continue with that would be great. So I thank you very much in advance for all of those bags, because every time I go over there, they're so happy to see me. So thank you very much, and I appreciate all of the people that are dropping them off. Please drop them off at the town, because I'm never home, and a few of them have blown across the neighborhood, and I've gotten a little talking to. So just drop them off at the office, because they're open from 8 till 4?
8:30 to 4:30, Monday through Friday.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have a number of things that were for, Councillor Blanchard, thank you for that. Why is the hand so small, eh?
I don't know. Thank you, Your Worship. Just, and you were probably going to touch on it in your comments, but I did want to say a big thank you to Luke McDonald and the organizers and all the volunteers from Paddlefest. I was able to attend with members of my family, and again, another very successful event for the town of St. Andrews. Well attended. Weather cooperated on one day. Everything else, I think, was more typical Paddlefest weather, but overall, I think just another great event, another great success story for St. Andrews for sure. So just thank you to all the organizers and volunteers and performers.
I was told today there's rain in the forecast next weekend, and it's going to be the 5th straight weekend in a row. It feels longer, but that's what I was told. But yes, thank you for that with Luke McDonald and his entire group of volunteers. They've been kind of a nucleus of them for a number of years, and of course all the other events that are based around recreation. There's a lot of people helping out there, so it's certainly a great festival. And with a town-wide yard sale, there wasn't a lot of cars in town, but again, rain, it was down a little bit. It's without events like the yard sale and Paddlefest, I think there'd be businesses struggling even more right now in these weather conditions. It does make people still travel to our community. It gives them a reason. So thank you for acknowledging Luke and his entire team. I have a list more for the registers, but I won't bring them at this time. So any reason to go to closed session? Okay, so I'll be looking at 8:59 p.m. for a motion to adjourn. I've got Councillor Gubishal, seconded by Deputy Mayor Akaji. All in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.